Hey everybody, Invisiblekatana here with my review for Star Wars Visions Volume 2. Of course, there will be spoilers as we go throughout this, so I'll be going pretty much episode by episode. I got my list all the way up because, of course, I don't remember any of the titles for any of the episodes. So I'll be going through. Once I get the title, I'll be good to go. But as you can see, I have my Return of the Jedi Luke lightsaber. That's because I just did my 40th anniversary review of Return of the Jedi. So definitely check that out. I'll actually just put it as an end title card here, or I'll put it as like one of the little cards that pop up. I always forget to do that, so it'll probably be an end title card, unless I remember. But going into Star Wars Visions Season 2, I watched pretty much all of it last night. I watched, I think, maybe 1 or 2 episodes a couple days back, and then I was able to kind of binge through the rest of the season last night, and it was definitely fun. I definitely had a great time with it. I think I would definitely say I for sure like this season more than I liked the last season. I felt like every single episode I really enjoyed in some way, shape, or form. Even the ones where it was like, oh, this one might be more comedic. It was funny enough to where I was like, all right, that's good. I think season 1 had, I think there's really only like 2 or maybe 3 episodes where I was just kind of like, I didn't like that episode as much. But in this season, I was just like, no, I like every single episode for some reason. It was either just the visuals of it were really great. Typically, all the stories were really good, but it was either like the visuals really stood out, a combination of the visuals and the story. Like there were probably like, in the last one, there were 2 that I really cared about where I was like, I would love to see a full series of this. Maybe 3, because the very first one and the last one where it was like the Ronin samurai thing. I love that. I just love samurai. So it's like, that was the full-on perfect combination of like Star Wars is inspired by samurai, and here it is like officially coming together. So that one I wanted. The Ninth Jedi, like everybody else, was like, it was already the 30-minute episode of that volume, and it was like, yeah, that's the one I want to see a full show on. And then I can't remember that it was like Poppy and something. Actually, I can just look it up right now, but I think it was like episode 7 or 8. Yeah, it was episode 8. Lop and Ultra was the other one that I really enjoyed, where it was like the sisters that ended up becoming villains or like rivals by the end of it, because the adopted daughter was the one that ended up getting the lightsaber and learning to utilize the Force, and the actual biological daughter ended up turning to like working for the Empire and stuff. And I was like, that's actually a really cool story. I'd love to see where that goes. So there were like 3 in the last one, but really just 2 was like the Ninth Jedi and Lop and Ultra, where I was like, I would love to see that continue. And in this one, there are like 3 or 4 of them where I was like, I would love to see where this goes next. Like, I would love to see what they do with these characters for sure. There's, one in particular where I was like, that's the one that definitely was like, this is the one that would definitely get a show. Maybe that's just the thing they should do. They should be like every volume, maybe 2. I want to say 1, but I'm like, a lot of them typically are really good where I'm like, I always want more than just 1 to get a full-on series. So maybe like 2 or 3 of them, they could just be like, all right, we'll get, Disney has so much money. Just like pay these studios to just be like, all right, you wrote this. These are the ones that everyone loves the most. Here you go. Like, these studios get that money, and then they get to go on and make full shows on it. Even if it was just like 1 season thing, they do the full story, make just a movie of it, whatever. Just give them the money. Disney, you got the money. Just be like, the ones that people love the most, just let those be full shows. That's what they should do. Personal opinion. But starting from the beginning, of course, we have Sith as our very first starter episode. Visuals, obviously, absolutely amazing. Some of my favorite visuals throughout the whole season. Might be my favorite one overall, just because of like the paint style of it, and like they have like vista shots, like the shot where they get caught out by the antenna and it's the Sith, and then like the 2, I would just say, well, I'll just assume bounty hunters next to them. The way they do the colors of that, where it's shifting between like, vibrant colors and then darker colors as it's saturated with the orange, and obviously dipping down into like red and then just pure black as far as the Sith. I was like, this is really good. And it's just that style that they utilize throughout the whole thing, where she's trying to paint this piece and like the art keeps changing from light to dark because she used to be a Sith. And I was like, that's, just the way they do it all, I thought was incredibly well done. And her, of course, realizing by the end there's, must be balance, and there is both light within the dark and dark within the light, all that good stuff, which, they touch on in a later episode as well. The 2 things coming together, especially for her having formerly been a Sith and leaving that life behind. But the way they do the action was really well done. Like she had like the crazy thing that General Grievous has from Revenge of the Sith, so that was super cool. It even has guns on it. Like they do like the crazy spin thing, and then she pops out the side with like 2 guns on it. I was like, that's super cool. So they take out the bounty hunters coming after her. Her droid actually has a full-on cannon in the middle. I love that droid. And this was officially the episode where it finally dawned on me, droids are the dogs of the Star Wars universe. Because when the dude came up, it was like, oh, the droid protected her from the other bounty hunter and like blew his head off. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And then the Sith guy came in and ripped him apart. I was like, oh man, he killed the droid. Like, that's effed up. Like, that's honestly how I felt. I was like, oh, he killed the effing droid. I hate this guy. So I was like, oh yeah, they're the dogs of the universe. But fortunately, everything was fine with that. But they had a great sequence after where she's going through, she has her lightsaber and they definitely do different styles. Like hers is curved like a katana, but his is straight like almost like a broadsword. I thought that was super cool. Like it was also actually flat when they did the close-up. I was like, oh, I didn't realize it was actually like a flat blade. So I thought that was super cool the way they handled that, and them doing that push and pull with the light and dark and the colors moving back and forth, and her trying to be like, this is where I am now, and it flushes to like the orange lily pads and stuff, and he's like, no, darkness is your fate, and then he pushes all the darkness on her again. I was like, this is really cool. And then she understands and then she has to go with the light and the dark, and that's where she has her lightsaber, but she still has her old kyber crystal as well, because I believe if it's a double sided saber, you do have to still have 2 crystals for each side to actually ignite. So it was cool because it was like, oh, she made her own, and she had the orange saber, and then when she realized, it was like, I have to still utilize that darker side of me, she busts out the second half, but it's still her old school red saber, that her red crystal. I was like, oh, that's really cool. And then she does like the classic final move, and she does like a spin hit on him, and the guy was just absolutely toast. And I was like, that was a great way to end it. So that was a really cool fight sequence, and then of course it ends with her and her droid taking off on a really cool ship, and then they have the painting of her with both sides ignited, the light and the dark within her unified. So I was like, fantastic, absolutely great first episode. And it takes off, and it was just like, all right, she's able to move on officially. She's figured out how to deal with her past by kind of understanding that it's just a part of her. She can't block it away. It's just who she is. She has to mix the light and the dark and move forward. So I was like, okay, cool, classic Star Wars lesson. The light cannot live without the dark, and vice versa. So I thought that was a great first episode. And then we move on to episode 2, which is Screecher's Reach. Very simple one. I'm just going to jump straight to the end. It was super cool. The kids go on an adventure. There's a crazy ghost. Ghost has actually a lightsaber. And I was like, oh, this is a Sith user. Little girl ends up activating her force powers, crushes the woman. She tries to get her lightsaber, girl grabs it, and then she kills the woman with a red lightsaber. And I was like, that's interesting. And then she talks to the little medallion. It's like, I did it with, your courage, or your believing in you or whatever. And then the thing speaks, and this glows red, and it's like, oh, that's a twist. And then the Sith woman comes down, super tall, and it's just like, all right, time to leave. You could just see like her whole face. She had the Sith eyes, she had the red lipstick, the sharp teeth, everything. It was like, this young girl wants to leave this planet, and she has that chance, and it's like, once you get it, don't look back. And she doesn't know, the path that she's going on now of, joining the Sith, and what that's going to do to her mentally. And then, they end it with her crying, and she actually does look back at them, whereas the whole point was not to look back. But I thought that was a good one. That was a great twist, where it's just like, oh, she has no idea that she's leaving. She thinks anything is better than this, but what she could become probably isn't what she would want to be. So fantastic ending. It was, like I said, very simple. You just jump to the end. It's like, holy crap. The reason that's so special is just, it was a great twist where, first off, it was already a Sith, and it was like, holy crap, she kills like this old Sith woman. And then another woman comes out and it's like, hey, you passed your test, that's yours, let's get out of here, kid. And it's like, well, you're a Sith, and it's gonna be bad for her. So great twist ending. And that's definitely was like the big impact of that one. Other than that, I thought it was fine, but it was definitely, once it got to the end, and it was like, oh, this isn't just a ghost story or anything. It's not just a little touch in the Force or whatever. She was actually talking to someone. She's like, I believe in your guidance, or in your faith and everything. And then she goes on to potentially become a Sith, or whatever dark story is going to happen there. So that was good. That was a great twist ending. It was like, ooh, that's kind of sad. Then we move on to episode 3, which was, okay, so I have to mention this right now. We got, I think, 3 claymation episodes, or at least, and some were, claymation or stop motion adjacent. Absolutely love that. I was so happy to see that. I thought we were going to have like 1 episode, 1 or 2 episodes, and then we got like the last episode as well. So I was like, I'm super happy with all the stop motion love that we got in this volume. Absolutely amazing. So that's where we hit our first episode that is stop motion, and that is In the Stars, and that has our 2 sisters. I don't know if they have names. They probably do. It just says 2 sisters on the description. So 2 sisters, young sister, older sister. Everybody's dead. Super dark. This whole volume, by the way, a lot of dark stuff. Everybody's dead. They are alone. It's just them on their planet, and then the Empire. They poison the water. They've taken the water. I guess the whole point of them poisoning the water was so in case anything else lived, it couldn't survive, and that way everything was completely wiped out. Because if they were taking the water, they wouldn't have to poison it first, because they did that, and then they were cleaning it inside the facility. So I think that was the point, was like, just in case there's anything, let's kill the water as a viable source of life. And that way, like, kill the water, everything dies. If the water's poisoned, life is dead. So I think that was the point of them doing that, because otherwise it was like, well, why are you purifying the water inside? I think it's to just kill everything else off. So we have these 2 sisters. Of course, the younger sister is like, hey, I have mom's power. Like, let me utilize mom's power to help defeat the Empire, and her older sister is, the classic older sibling where it's like, hey, we've already suffered. I can't lose you to, like, you need to stop, playing around. I'm gonna go get the water. You're gonna stay here. We're gonna do what we always do. Of course, her little sister goes in, gets busted. Then they have a crazy sequence where they try to escape. They can't escape because her sister, really, they were super close. And then her sister's like, I can't leave. Like, I know we can do this. I got to do it. And so, of course, she has to go in, protect her sister, beat these guys up with the staff. Her sister does come in and help her when she starts getting tased. Then it's like, all right, I got to get to my sister. The dude drops her off, knocks the dude out. And then, of course, the older sister activates her power of the Force, saves her sister, and then they team up. And you think they're going to take out the walker. And instead, they end up taking out like the water system. They like bust the pipes and the whole place floods, and it clears everything out. And then the water is purified, the clouds part, and then they see all of their, their people in the stars looking down upon them, and they're able to, move forward and know that they're never actually going to be alone. So that was definitely a good one. Love the animation style of it. I loved the visuals for that one. I thought were really great because there were moments where it was hard for me to tell what was CG and what was stop motion, because the way they would do the shots, it was like, okay, that looks like a stop motion figure walking, and it's like it would be like a giant landscape shot, and I'm like, I can't tell if this is an actual set that they built. So I'm definitely gonna look up some of the behind the scenes for that one. But I was like, I can't tell if this is CG or full stop motion, but I think some of the sets were CG, and just the way they did it, it just all looks so well done. Because I know the water for sure was CG at the very end, but I think there were other portions where the water was stop motion. I couldn't, once again, going back and forth, it was some of those things where I'm like, some of this I'm pretty sure is actual stop motion, handmade stop motion, and then some of this is that super tricky Lego movie magic stop motion where it's like, that's not stop motion, but it definitely looks like stop motion. But either way, visuals were good, and I definitely enjoyed the story. It was definitely an emotional one at the end where, they ultimately come together and, officially kind of wipe out the Empire in their town, or on their home planet, I guess, in general. And then it's like the two of them are able to at least live in peace. So I thought that was a good ending. Moving on to the next one, once again, claymation. And this one was full on Wallace and Gromit. Absolutely loved it. It was also the one that was the funniest one. And this was also the most reference-based episode for sure. So this was like them doing like a fun, this would be the episode where everyone's like, oh, okay, it's kind of like the kitty episode and stuff. And it definitely was. But because they utilized all of Star Wars, it definitely made it a great episode, because it could have easily just been like, oh, it's the kitty one where, this girl's embarrassed by her mom, she didn't want to say anything, and then they go on a race and it's like, oh, they join together and it's nice at the end. That was good. It was a decent, story. It was very simple, but it was a good story. But then literally every single scene in this has probably some sort of reference, or very close to it. Maybe not literally every single one, but like every minute you're seeing some sort of reference. Something looks like something actually is something. There is a reference to everything Star Wars. Wedge Antilles is in here, and he is voiced by the actual actor who is Wedge Antilles, so that was super cool. They have the posters in the background, like in her room. One of them, that was Wedge, even though he was blue, that was Wedge. The other one was actually Hera, so that was Hera Syndulla. They reference Ryloth, which is where those people are from. The astromech droid, of course, kind of looked like he had like R2's design and stuff, but he was, it was like a full-on, like a wiener dog, which I thought was funny. But they had that. They had obviously all the different ships in the race. The one ship that I think it was the Wookiees, they had the ship from the Jedi games, which I thought was amazing. They had like the Mantis ship, so I thought that was super cool. I was like, I think the first time that game's been referenced. Well, actually, it's not, because not BD1, but the BD droid was in Boba Fett. So I think that was the first reference that got outside of the games. But I was like, that's super cool. So basically, they had the Mantis. They had obviously like the Imperial version of the Naboo ship that they had from episode 1, where it was all silver, but this of course was black and red. So that was super cool. I think the other two ships, I can't really remember exactly what they were, but I think they were references, to other things. But I thought that was super cool. Of course, they had like a mini Death Star, which was super hilarious, and they were just shooting stuff. I was like, they have a mini Death Star, so that's funny. When they're going through the bazaar, and obviously you can watch YouTube, you'll see all the references from the episode, but Chopper was in the background there. And I saw this because I was watching one of those videos, and someone mentioned in the comments, the other droid that's there is actually the Wallace and Gromit droid from like the very first episode when they go to the moon to get the cheese. And it's like a security drone that's on the moon, and it was in that episode because it has like the white gloves and stuff, and that was super cool. I was like, oh, that is that one. So I thought that was amazing. They actually put the Wallace and Gromit reference in there, so that was great. Obviously they reference Porgs. They have the other carnivores, Porgs, Blurgs, Banthas was there. They had Luke's lightsaber was there, and it was stolen by something with an orange arm. The Jawa was about to steal it, but something else stole it. Of course, they have the Jawa in the very beginning, Seutini, which is obviously fantastic. There's a bunch of other stuff that was on sale in the bazaar. So I thought that was great. It was definitely a funny episode where it was like, it was definitely because it was silly, and then they just had all the references throughout the entire thing. Was definitely amazing. So I loved it all the way through because I was like, all of this stuff is really silly, and then the story itself is definitely funny. And of course, they ultimately end up bonding at the end. It's like, of course, I'm embarrassing. I am your mother. Obvious reference to I am your father. So even the title was a reference to Star Wars. So they did a great job with that one. It was definitely the silliest, I would say, throughout all of the stories, but they did what they did best. And it was like, we're going to make a funny, simple, happy story, but also here's like a ridiculous amount of everything Star Wars just all over the place, even if it makes no sense whatsoever. Like, here's Luke's lightsaber. I think Luke's hand was in there as well. So here's his lightsaber, here's his hand, here's these other things, here's references to these creatures, that creature, this droid, that ship, that game, that movie, all this stuff from Star Wars. Absolutely amazing. So that was probably why I love that one so much, because even I was catching all the references, and it was just a fun, silly story. And obviously the rival girl and her mom having the same pose, like when her mom showed up and then they both make the same pose, like, oh, my mom's here. I thought that was pretty funny, but they had like the ridiculous hair and stuff. So everything about that one was super silly, super simple, but very fun. And all the references were absolutely amazing. So had a great time with that one. And that leads into episode 5, which is the longest episode. And that's the one that was like, oh, this could definitely be the one, kind of like Ninth Jedi, where it had a lot of extra time to it. And also, it could easily go into a series, and that is Journey to the Dark Head. And so this involves a young girl who is able to see visions within the Force through the stones, and then a young Jedi who was basically tempted by the dark side, or specifically, he has a bit of anger within him, or fear, as they say, which fear leads to anger. The two of them coming together on this mission, where she had this vision, and it's like, okay, I've seen this vision, I'm not entirely certain what it is. Over time, somehow she ends up getting in front of the Jedi Council, because she's never a Jedi, but clearly she's moved up in the world and she's able to actually get a meeting with them. And so she's like, look, I need to go to this place and just destroy the dark side head, and it'll just stop the war. They're in some other war, some version of the war. We don't know exactly the era, but they're in a war. I would assume it's pre-episode 1. So, actually that doesn't make any sense, because they're like, the Sith haven't been here forever. So maybe it's even older than that, High Republic style or something. But either way, no matter what it is, they end up going on this journey that by the end they realize that they both really needed that. And so, it starts off as classic sort of deal, like, oh, like you seem, kind of, are you short to be a stormtrooper sort of deal. It's like, you seem real young to be a Jedi. You don't really talk much like a Jedi or anything like that. It's like, yeah, okay, whatever. So they're going on this mission. She's buying, these parts and stuff that she doesn't need. And the dude's like, hey, you don't need any of this crap. But then he sees someone outside, and that triggers like his memory of this crazy moment where, we saw the full flashback earlier, where his master, who was totally disrespected, by the way, like he was about to get killed, she came in and saved him, and she had one line, I'm gonna stop you, or whatever she said, and she instantly got killed right after. And granted, it wasn't from the lightsaber, it was like the dude had like a crazy living tendril spear or whatever, because I thought it was gonna be his tail. It's just a whip that he holds, but it's like it can move around like it's actually alive. So it's even crazier, because it wasn't actually attached to him as a part of like his cybernetic body or anything. It was just a thing that he held like a whip that can just move around on its own. So it's even crazier that it's not attached to him. But she was trying. She was like, I'm gonna take you down or whatever. Instantly dead. She got killed. The kid was super pissed, and he tried to do something, and the guy's like, you have a bit of anger in you. Like, why don't you come back to me when you're ready to join the dark side? Gives him a little stab on the face, like that way I'll know it's you. But of course they have their connection in the Force, and it was like, okay, so now that he had that flashback because of the person walking past the window, it just so happened that the guy was on the same planet, which of course the woman who totally looked like Adigala, obviously same species, she knew that they both needed that mission. Probably one of those classic things like, I've seen it in the future, that sort of deal. So he's like, oh, he's here. Let me see why he's here. So he chases them down, destroys their ship. Then they're on a speeder. They have an insane fight on top of a large speeder, which I thought, like, if this was live action, that would be insane, because it would be hard to, realistically have that play out and like keep that action, logical enough to where it's like, how are they even standing on the ship as it's flying? They fly off the hand into the sky. He force pushes her so she can land on top of like this big halo ring looking thing. He jumps off using the Force. The Sith user jumps off using the Force, and then they just have an amazing fight. They crash through the ground. They're fighting and flipping all over the place. Like the visuals were, this was the full-on anime episode, which the last volume definitely had way more anime stuff compared to this one, but this was the full anime episode, and it was very well done. The visuals looked really, really good. So Absolutely loved it the whole way through. And then once again, classic story, the light and the dark must coexist together, otherwise it's chaos. So of course they realize that stuff. It allows for them to both overcome their issues, where she realizes, holy crap, that vision that I was seeing where it was two figures clashing, I was that small figure in the center. And so they end up working together. Dude completely decapitates the Sith. I was like, wow, he chopped his effing head off. He killed him. And then it was like, I'm ready to die. She of course dives down, saves his life. They land, and then, they have the conversation where he's like, knee balance in the Force, all that good stuff. And it's like, man, I really needed this mission. I think you did too. And then they become friends, and it goes off, and they're making fun of each other. Like, you crashed the ship. It's like, well, you aren't a great Jedi. And it's like, I'd like to see that continue, that buddy cop sort of relationship. So that was definitely a fun episode. And who knows? They talked about The Ninth Jedi. I'm still waiting for that one to get a series, because that was really, really good. I don't know if they'll do anything with any of these, if we're being completely honest, because at this point, they should have announced that by now if they were actually going to do that, and we haven't heard anything. So I don't know if we should ever expect any of this stuff to go beyond shorts. I hope one day that does change for sure, because there are multiple ones. Like I said, like for this volume and the last volume, it's like there are a couple of these where I'm like, I'd like to see something, even if you just make it like a movie. Give me like a 2-hour movie. At least we got more. That's all I really want. And I think there's a lot of people, like, we don't have to have a series. We'd like it because it would just be more. It wouldn't just be 2 hours. But if it could just be a movie, at least give us that. So that actually leads into the next episode that I would love to see continue, which actually I realize now, looking at these times, the last the last 5 episodes are at least 17 minutes. The final episode is 17. Episode 6, 7, and 8 are all 19. So they actually have like quite a few episodes are really long. So 5 to 8 are almost 20 minutes apiece. So I didn't realize that when I was watching them all, but it makes sense now, because they definitely felt like they had like full stories because they're a bit longer. But the Spy Dancer might be my favorite one. From this one. I love the visuals. I love the style of it. I don't know if she was a Force user, and I don't really care. She was doing some wild stuff and it looked amazing. Her like throwing the stuff like a ninja, and then the story of her seeing the Imperial guy and like having the flashback of the guy that took her son, and then she thinks it's him, and then she realizes, holy crap, it's not the guy who took my son, it's my son. And that junk was crazy. And then they have a great action sequence where she's just destroying everybody, and then she just tells him, it's like, hey, you're my son. She gives him like the little piece that she was always wearing, and they also show that she put like a little tracker on the back of it as well. But man, that was a good one. That was an emotional. I was like, this is really good. I was high watching these, by the way, so maybe that's why they were all hitting extremely hard. But I was like, these are really good. Like the stories were getting super deep. It was the story of like an adult person as well. That's fairly different from what we typically get from Star Wars. It's people like up and coming and figuring out the Force and stuff like that. I guess technically episode 5 was kind of the same. Like they were younger, but they had already figured out kind of what they needed to do. They just had like a specific moment. It was just the way their characters were played that made them feel even younger. But in this, it was specifically like an adult woman and like her friends and like that small group being within the rebellion and like making this ship out of almost at Death Star parts, but out of like TIE fighter pieces and things like that. And just going through that and like the action and the visuals of it, all of that stuff was fantastic. And then it gets to the end where she's like, you're my son. And it's just like, he's just stunned, and she leaves the stuff with him, and he has like the piece of her cloth and the little thing that she gave him, and he just looks at the thing, and it's him as a kid, and they show him like lift his hat up, and you see like they cut the horns off. And at first it was like, oh, like they shaved the horns, and I was like, oh, that's why he covers his eye. And then it dawned on me, I don't think he covered his eye. I think they took his eye. I don't think it's just a simple eye. It could just be a simple eye patch, but I was like, they shaved the horns, why wouldn't they just pluck the eye out? It was like, well, it's going to be covered anyway, and it's an Imperial thing for sure. I was like, I could just be getting extra dark, but I was like, I think they took his eye. I don't think it's just an eye patch. I think like his eye is gone. I don't think it's covered. Obviously speculation, but I was like, considering how dark things got in some of these episodes, especially the next one we're getting to, Jesus, or no, the one after the next. So episode 7 is fine. Episode 8, the pit, is the one that was crazy. But I was like, maybe I was getting too dark with it, but I was like, I think his eye is just gone. I don't think it's covered. But once again, that's speculation. But I love that one. I was like, that was a crazy story, and I love the way that was handled. And it was like, his weapon was even cool. They broke it, but I was like, that was actually a cool weapon, where it was almost like the purple lightning weapons that they use, but it was just in staff form. I was like, that was actually kind of cool. But she shattered it, and I was like, that's gone. But it looked pretty sweet. I was like, that's actually kind of neat. But love that one. Like I said, the visuals were great. Like, just the movements, her using the cloth and everything and jumping around, all of it just looked super, super cool. So I love that. The droid, super menacing. I absolutely love the droid in this one too. Like, they did a fantastic job. He was like, they've been using them because they're in Jedi Survivor as well. I'm like, they use them a lot in those games. Even in Jedi Fallen Order, the K droids are in there a lot. And I'm like, they are very menacing. They're like super tall and slender. And then at the chest, it's just like, boom, they just expand and they're just powerful. And it's like, those are actually really good droids. I like that we get to see a lot more of them now because like they are very menacing. Like they have that slender frame and it's just pure power behind all of their moves. And they're just devastating. But I love the way they did that. The way they like rip it apart where she ties it up as she's falling and she ties up in all these different ways so she can just pull it and it just rips. And I was like, that's super cool. It's a great way to do it. Then the dude comes in when she gets grabbed and they Terminator mode and he has to chop its head off. I was like, that was pretty cool. Like I love like the violent K droids. They're really nice. They're really nice to look at. So all of the action was really good and the visuals were great. Once again, would love to see an actual continuation of that. I think it would be really cool to have this focus, especially with the focus mostly being on an older character who has to deal with like this different aspect of it. It's something you don't see as much in Star Wars. So I would love to see that one continue as well. Just hoping, but we'll see. Then we move on to episode 7, which is the Bandits of Golak. And this is the one where it's kind of funny. This episode, and then of course the final episode, were the ones where I was like, oh, these are the stories that feel very similar, where it was people having to leave their family. But this one also had like the Clone Wars aesthetic, and it was very cool. It was like a different painting style a little bit. It was like it kind of looks like Clone Wars, but it's almost like the paint strokes are like in different ways. It was different patterns of paint strokes is how it looks. So I was like, I actually thought that was a cool concept. But man, that girl was just effing up. She was just like, I'm gonna get dad's flute, and then just like, what the f was that? Like she just kept getting busted. She was screwing them over. Honestly, she was screwing them over for sure. Like her brother was doing the best that he could, but his little sister was effing up like crazy. It's like, let me just grab this belt. She was a kid and just wasn't getting there in a very dire situation. And they would have been screwed. If it wasn't for the fact that those bandits randomly happened to attack the train, they would have been screwed. Because that's the only reason that he ended up escaping, was because the troopers ended up being distracted by all the other insurgents coming in. And it was like, man, that was very fortunate for them. Get to their destination, they end up getting to this temple, end up being a Jedi temple, of course. And they go through this process. Once again, she was effing up. It was like, let me float this food around. He's like, you need to stop. And then of course they got busted again, but it didn't really make any difference because it had already been done. The story was already taking place outside of like that little temple that they were in. People were already being killed. And then the door opens and this dude is just like, did I miss something? And this dude came in and he looked so cool. Like I love the design for him. And then he of course had, the troopers, they don't do anything. Like once that sandstorm kicks up, they got knocked out instantaneously. But he came in, he, had the classic, he had the Inquisitor lightsaber and stuff going, and it was like, this looks super cool. And he comes in, it's a very menacing speech, and he's using the Force in like these really little ways where he would like just slightly move stuff or like kind of bring them closer. I actually really like that, where it's like he's talking, he already knows what he has, but he was just doing like little stuff just to F with their heads. And I was like, that's actually really cool. It's just like, let me just slightly move this thing, and like, let me pull you in just a little bit. You're already like an arm's length away. Let me just pull you in a little bit closer. So I like what they did with his character design wise and just that speech that they had. And then of course he assumed it was the girl, which obviously he was correct because she was effing them up. She was being dumb. But then it's like, oh, okay, they got the storm coming in, things get a little crazy, the little girl's trying to run and everything. And then the old woman whips out not one lightsaber from McCain, but 2 lightsabers. She starts dual wielding. And this fight sequence was so good. I was genuinely, when it first started, I was like, I can't tell if this is just CG, because their movements were so fluid. I was certain that it was mocap. Like there was parts when it like first started, I was like, that looks like mocap. And then there are other parts where it looked like it would go into just normal like CG rigs that they were using, animation rigs. But I was like, there were just moments of it where I'm like, that looked like an actual person did it, but maybe we, it just got to that point. I don't know. But I was like, the fight was definitely great. It was definitely one of the best lightsaber fights that we got like throughout this whole volume for sure. And it was a decently long fight too. Like they went back and forth. The dude got knocked down and got back up. He did like the spin where he uses the saber to like kind of float himself up like just a tiny bit. I love that they're keeping that. Like people have been referencing that, and it's kind of utilized a tiny bit even in like the novel there's a novel between the Jedi Survivor and Fallen Order games, or Fallen Order Survivor games. They reference that. They reference like ever since like season 2 of Rebels, where that's been utilized, people have been like kind of sneaking it in. I feel like it's been making a comeback this year. I'm like, it went away for a minute where everyone talks about it, but then it was like, it's officially been back in Star Wars for a little bit where people have actually referenced it. And I'm like, I like seeing that. It's ridiculous, but I do like seeing it, and it's really good. And it's, you know, it's not as crazy. It hasn't been as absolutely insane as it was in Star Wars Rebels, because they were literally like just, they were flying from like 50 feet up in the sky, hundreds of feet in the sky. They were just like floating down. And then this is, you know, it was much simpler, and it was like, okay, you could also say it's like the sandstorm, the wind picked up, and he did just a little bit to get himself back on his feet. It wasn't super insane, but I was like, I like seeing it. I like that people are like, that was the thing that happened in Rebels. Let's still do it at least a little bit. So love the fight sequence. It was definitely good. And then once everything is said and done, we have like the super tragic moment where it's like his sister can go on this journey, but no one else can. And that, you know, goes back to episode 2 with Screecher's Reach. Much darker in her case, obviously, but in this one, it's like, I would assume with the Jedi symbol and everything. And this one was very powerful in the Force. Like, she was doing some Yoda stuff where I'm like, she was flipping and flying. I'm like, this is Yoda. Like, this lady's older, but she was flipping and doing all sorts of stuff. And then she's like moving the water and doing it, you know, parting Red Sea. She was doing all the Bible stuff. So it was like, this is really cool. Like, she's very powerful. And it's like, unfortunately, you can't go on this journey. Just your sister can. And it's like, man, it was just a sad moment. And, you know, they have their moment where they do their bandit thing. And then he was just there, and it's like, dang, she's gone. She's just gone forever. And then, you know, they have the flute like kind of pops up, and that was like the thing that he needed to be okay with her moving on, and she needed to know that he was okay. I was like, that was a really sweet way to end it. But man, that was a really good one. I especially like the ending where it was just like, that they just have to, you know, kind of deal with that journey. And it was much more impactful, I think, in this than it was like in episode 2. And the same happens in episode 9 where it's actually a family member. This one I still think hits the hardest, because even in episode 9 with Aoi, or Au, I believe it was Au, maybe that's how you pronounce it. She had like 2 weeks, because the woman was like, you know, I'll be leaving in a fortnight. I'm like, okay, she had 2 weeks to be with her dad. They literally went through, they saw this amazing fight sequence, which for them was probably just scary. But for me, you know, it's an amazing fight sequence. And then it's like, okay, your sister's going to be gone probably forever. Like, he did the cool thing where he had like the lollipop in her hand, which I thought was super fun. Like, the whole episode, it was like they're eating it like it's actual food. And I guess that's what it was supposed to be, because that's like there's one part where you see like actual meat, it looked like, but I'm like, they're just eating these things. I'm like, are these not just lollipops? Because that's what they look like, but it seemed like it was actual food, I guess. But the whole thing they're going through, and, you know, he opens his hand and she was happy. It's like, you know, one day we'll collect all the whatever it was actually called, you know, throughout the galaxy. And, you know, he does that, but it was still like they had to just do it in that moment. And it was like, yeah, you can't come, you're not a Jedi, you don't have the Force, and that's it. Which I still find super dark. But that's one of the things with the Jedi where it's like, I'm not 100% on board with that stuff, because I'm like, you're already going into hiding and doing this and doing that. Maybe just keep them together. Like, obviously he can't train in the Force, but you could just have a dude that is like cool and like wants to help and do other things. Like, there's no reason to actually separate them, especially at that point in the era of Star Wars. It was like, you're literally only going to be teaching her in hiding. It makes no sense whatsoever to not really let them just go together. But that's kind of the thing, is like, you can only go if it's just you. That's just how it is. And it's like, it's super effed up, because there's not really much of a reason to not do that in this particular era, at the very least. Like, when it was specifically like, you're leaving to go to the Jedi temple and stuff, it was like, it sucks, but it also kind of makes more sense. Like, your life is now over there. When you're already in hiding and you're just gonna go in hiding somewhere else, it's kind of effed up that they do it that way, where it's like, you could still just bring her brother along, because it's not like it used to be. Like, it doesn't have to be that much of a secret that you can just never see it ever. Like, it's kind of effed up. But the Jedi don't always do things the right way. That's just how it is. So that was definitely tragic. But that leads into episode 8, which was dark as F. The Pit. The Pit was so effed up. Also, once again, I was high watching all of these, but that was probably my favorite actual ending to an episode, that final sequence, which I'll talk about when we get there. But The Pit was wild. They find some Kyber. They tell these people dig, and they dug like it was nobody's business. I love the time lapse. Visually, it looked great. You see the city being built in the background, days and nights, weeks and months passing, and these people are just digging. They dig so far down. Still weird to me that they never ended up digging a thing, because they showed at one point during the time lapse, they had a thing where they had ramps going up. So it felt super weird that by the end, they literally just dug straight down and had literally nothing. I thought that was kind of weird, because I'm like, they clearly showed in there that they had ramps and stuff, and eventually they stopped doing that. This dude hits the end. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. Dude hits the end. All right, you guys are free. And I thought the story from there was going to be like, wow, that's very interesting. Like, what happens when the Empire just like, the Empire doesn't care. It's like, we got what we needed. All right, let's get the F out of here. And I was like, okay, they're done. And then it was like, they left and the lights are just like, pew, everything just turns off. And then you realize there is no way out. They didn't have the stairs anymore. I was like, okay, they have the stairs, they're gonna walk out, and then it's like, well, what do we do now? They didn't have any of that. They were just in a pit. They were in the Dark Knight Rises. They had nothing. It was just like they left, and then they just left people in a pit. And I was like, holy crap, this is insane. And so then, of course, this one dude who all I could think of especially when he took like his sleeve off and put the bandana around his head, I was like, he reminds me of the dude, I can't think, Sean, that's what it was. He reminds me of Sean from Street Fighter. That's all I could think, because I'm like, he was in like the yellow and had the bandana. I was like, this dude reminds me of Sean from Street Fighter. He's like, all right, I'm gonna climb out, I'm gonna go to the city, I'm gonna tell them that we need help, they have to follow their light and everything. And he tells the little girl, he gives her like, piece of kyber. And it's like, I'm gonna get us help. He actually escapes. They have the little armadillo come out. As far as I'm concerned, that is the Star Wars version of the Badger Moles from Avatar. They had no reason to help. They just did. They just taught him something. It was like, hey, we'll help. I'm gonna help you get out of here, kid. He gets out. He goes to the place. Nothing's happening. And then he sees the kyber crystals. He follows the light. Does his full speech. Stormtroopers come in. They hear, once he says kids, you hear the people like, kids. That'll always get them. Help the kids. Stormtroopers come in, blast this dude in an alley. And then they just take him back. It was insane, because I'm like, okay. It was a great transition, by the way, with the thunder where they're dragging him, and then it like thunders, and then you just see that they're at the pit already. And I was like, there's no effing way that this is about to happen. There's no way that this legit just does not work. And they just kill this dude, right? Like, something's gonna happen. He's gonna wake up. There's gonna be somebody there. Something's gonna happen. But no, he wakes up as they're doing the swing. He's screaming not to be thrown in this pit, and they just toss him. It's not like the Emperor did this. It wasn't Darth Vader chopping his head off. These were just two stormtroopers that were like, ah, man, we don't like that. And they threw this man in a pit and killed him. He died. It was so crazy. I was like, this is the darkest thing ever. And then, of course, the little girl that he, was kind of inspiring to be like, hey, you have to be hopeful and, follow the light. She says, this is how we, get the people to find us. Like, we tell them. And so they just speak. And then eventually the people do end up coming out. I would assume they hear them, but also they were so far away. I'm like, even with all those people doing that, I'm like, I don't know if that works 100%, but I guess at nighttime, if it gets quiet enough, someone would be like, what the F is that noise? You just hear like this bellowing noise. So eventually people go out there. They have the commander come down. I thought it looked great, by the way. I love the cape. I thought that was super cool. I was like, this blue cape looks pretty sick. But tries to stop the people, doesn't actually shoot anybody, because I was like, I thought for sure he was going to start blasting people, and then they would actually fight that hard to save the people in the pit, that some people would die, but they just let them pass. And then it's like, well, it's time for us to leave. So it's like, all right, let's get out of here, guys. And so they actually do that. And the people, they realize that there are actually people in the pit. Like, this dude actually did, he was telling the truth. It was like, hey, you have to help us. And then they have that half a moment where you see all the lanterns just back up, like everybody just left. And then they just all get super depressed. And then it's like, here comes the ship. All the people get rescued. And it was a very bittersweet ending, because of course the dude died. And they, this is the one episode that had a post-credit sequence where you see what the guy was spray painting on the rock. And it's it says in Arabic, The Pit, which is just the title of the episode, but it has like the mural of him and like the chains and everything. Definitely great. The final sequence though, where she has the kyber crystal, the little girl has the kyber crystal, and she's thinking about him, and then she attunes with the crystal, was like the coolest thing ever, where you actually see a kyber crystal in her hand actually take color, and you see the blue light form. I was like, that is like this. It was like so cool when I was watching it. Once again, I was high as hell, but it was such a great shot visually, because that's just not something you see. That's not something that is typically shown. Like, you always hear about kyber crystals and stuff and what can be done and stuff like that, but you don't really see a lot of it where you see the crystal change. You certainly don't see it like that. Even with the final episode where all the kyber crystals turn from red to white, it wasn't the same thing. Like, them being purified was very different. This was like, you see someone, basically attune with the force, and you see the kyber crystal bond with her in that moment, and like her eyes light up blue, and she got a blue crystal for the lightsaber she would eventually make in the future. That one I wasn't too concerned with, as far as like, oh, I want to see a series of this or anything. That I just thought was great on its own, and just had a really epic ending. Like, she could just go off to do anything and eventually find a Jedi, make a lightsaber, and she'd always have that crystal. And that would be like her journey, where it's like, I got this crystal from the man that freed us from the pit. That would always be like her story for that. And I thought that was cool. That wasn't one where I was like, oh man, I would love to see what happens next. Maybe because it was so effing dark, I was like, just end on this very amazing, beautiful shot of a pure kyber crystal actually turning blue for the lightsaber she would get down the line. And then I'm done, because it's dark as F. I don't need to be reminded of them throwing this dude in the pit. Like I think about that. I actually was thinking about it, and it was just like, it's so dark. It's so effed up. Like him waking up and being like, what the holy crap? And he's screaming, please don't do, like screaming not to be thrown into this pit. And they just, whoop, all right, job's done. We're stormtroopers. Let's go home. It was so messed up. It's so dark. It's so dark, but I love the ending. Yeah, it was, like I said, beautiful shot. I thought it was absolutely amazing because it's just not something that we ever see, but super dark. And that leads into episode 9, which is a great palette cleanser. And once again, stop motion, or at least stop motion adjacent. Absolutely loved it. Everything looked like yarn, so it looked great. Au's song, I can't remember exactly what it's from, but I'm gonna go with Au. Absolutely love this episode. Once again, another simple episode, but it was fun. And I have to mention this off the top. It will never happen, but the Jedi in this episode looked so cool. I was like, I would love a figure of her character. It will never happen, but she looked so sweet. Like I loved her hat. I love like the earrings she had, like everything. She had like the cool anime bandages and stuff, like she'd be doing martial arts. I was like, I just want a figure of her character because she looks sick. Like the purple skin with like the black. I was like, everything about her design was 100% perfection. And I was like, I'll never see a figure of that character, but I would really want one. So I'm gonna have to do some research because somebody might do it. Somebody might make a custom figure. I might have to pick it up because I was like, she looks sick. And she had a blue lightsaber, which is my personal favorite. If it was a double-sided lightsaber, I would have loved her even more. But just her visuals were absolutely amazing. But Au has a great power within the Force that allows her to actually attune with kyber crystals, which I thought was super cool. And you know, she has this ability where, you know, they call out to her, they sing to her, and if she can't control it, of course, things kind of get bad. They get, you know, they're already red kyber crystals, so they're a little pissed off. There's a little dark energy in there. So I like the way that was handled throughout the episode, where it was like you're watching her have this connection. Obviously, she has this curiosity, the Jedi, which I don't believe they actually say her name. They probably do, and I just don't remember. But she's like, oh, you know, like you've grown and become so curious, and she instantly, you know, recognized, even when she saw what was happening, she was like, oh, she has the powers of the Force. And so when they have that curiosity go through and she ends up going down to the mines, which she's not supposed to do, of course, but she does. They have, first off, an amazing sequence where naturally she's just attuning with the Force, I would say, and the kyber crystals calling out to her so she can get to a deeper part of the mine. But also, and this probably wasn't meant to be this way, but it was Evil Dead. It was an Evil Dead shot. That's all I could see. Like the camera moved in, it looked at her, she looked at it, and then it turned around. I was like, I highly doubt that was meant to be an Evil Dead reference, but that's what I got out of it, and that made the episode 100 times better. Just because of that, I was like, and it genuinely, it looked really cool too. Like the motion of it just looked sweet because of how it's, you know, the stop motion and everything. So the motion of it and all that stuff already looked really cool, and then it was like, that was legit like an Evil Dead sequence. So I thought it was great, but love how that worked. And then you think she's gonna get her song, and then her dad comes in, and then that's what screws everything up, where she gets distracted. All the crystals are like crumbling and about to explode and stuff. The Jedi comes in, she does some epic moves. She glides down the rock, which was a Jedi survivor thing, so that I'm gonna be doing that a lot when I play that game because I haven't gotten far. But she did that move and like stabbed the lightsaber into the rock, flips off, blocks a couple things, and then she does a force bubble around them and protects them. And then Au sings her song and it purifies all of the crystals, and I thought that was super cool. Like all of them just turn white, and they have like a really great visual sequence where all the crystals go from red to white, or technically clear in a sense. And I thought that was great. And then of course it's like, hey, you have a very special gift, and you know, I could teach you to harness this, but you'd also have to leave home. Like I said, for her, it was much simpler. It wasn't like in the moment, like with the siblings. It was like, hey, you got 2 weeks. You got 2 weeks to do everything you need to do and like accept it. And it felt much happier because it was like, she got a buttload of time. It wasn't like in the moment, you need to leave right now and then just see what happens. But I still really enjoyed it. And, you know, of course, it ends and like she goes off on this adventure to eventually become a Jedi, and they show like the kyber crystal, everything is pure now. So it was a great ending. Definitely a great finale. I think if they ended with the pit, it would have been a more epic ending, but it was just, I truly loved that final visual shot of the little girl like actually attuning with the crystal and turning it blue. I just like that shot as like a final shot to see all things Star Wars. It was a great thing. But I definitely loved the final episode. All of them, like I said, all in all, I really enjoyed this season. I thought it was really good. Multiple ones where I would like to see a story continue. Visual, stop motion or stop motion adjacent, really, really well done. Something that popped into my head that I have to mention before I end this review out. In the episode with the twins, or the siblings, I mean, when they had the scene where all the food was floating in the air, and there were those 2 guys that kept fighting throughout the whole episode, like, oh, he did this thing or whatever. All the food is floating around hitting everybody. the tall guy just had a pan on the back of his head, and he looked at it, and he turned to the other dude with the most angry look on his face, and he backhands him with the back of that pan. I laughed so incredibly hard. I wanted to mention that once again, I was high. That's probably why I laughed as hard as I did. But it was like the way he looked, where he took it off, I was just like, and he just backhands this dude. I was laughing so hard. I rewound that a couple of times to watch that because it was making me laugh like crazy. So I wanted to mention that before I ended out this review. But I love this volume. I definitely like this volume more than the last one because, like I said, I think there's just more episodes that hit higher quality. You know, at least emotionally, visually, I think everything was fine, even from the last volume. So it was definitely more just being interested in the stories more, whether it was, you know, twist endings like episode 2 or just the journey of like just that harsh cut of being like, all right, well now I'm gonna go off and learn to be a Jedi, and you're just here. Like we're just gone forever. Like as siblings, we're gone. As you as my father, I'm leaving you behind. I have to leave, you know, let my daughter leave the planet, like her entire life behind, to find something new. Like I thought those just hit harder. Something that I didn't notice, and this is something that has definitely caused flack for this volume. I didn't realize that all the protagonists were female characters. I genuinely did not notice at all until someone mentioned it, that every single episode, they were all female led episodes. Honestly, did not notice. The only thing I noticed were the 2 episodes where it was like, oh, it's people, you know, it's like people, young kids learning to join the, you know, learning about the Force and stuff, and then having to leave their life behind. Didn't even realize even all of those were, you know, young girls. I noticed that it was young kids doing that, but I didn't realize it was girls. I like, not a single part of me realized that it was girls. Although I would argue the pit was more focused on that boy. Even though he died, I still feel like he was the main character. I think if they continued the story, the little girl would be the main character. But I was like, you know, it's definitely the guy that was, I personally at least felt, was the main character of that episode. And of course, episode 7 was both of them as siblings. Like obviously one character, if they continued that series, I think it would have been really cool if they did have a back and forth thing where you saw what 2 characters did away from each other. But that would be an interesting show to watch, just to see what both of them do separately, and then they just don't come together. That would be a crazy show, and it's just them separated. But I think that was it. You know, it didn't matter to me. Obviously, I didn't even realize it, but it's definitely made some people upset, where it was like, you know, a lot of female leads, or mostly female leads, legit was like right over my head. Didn't pay attention to any of that. Didn't even notice it. But there are also so many episodes where it's like, yeah, I guess it started with women, but like the characters are literally like split in half. Like you have the siblings, the Darkhead episode, like the other Jedi character was obviously like the other main character. It started with the girl, but I'm like, the balance of that episode was clearly like 50-50. Like they're both the main character. So I don't even think that's 100% accurate that it was just female leads. Just wanted to put that out there because that was just a thing that I noticed. Like I said, not even when I was watching it, just other people said it. People are a little upset about that. I could not possibly care less. I like the season more. Not because of that, just I like the season more. I didn't even notice, but wanted to throw that out there. We'd love to know your thoughts on that, if it bothered you or not, if it was too super woke or whatever. To me, it's just, I liked it. I like good Star Wars, and I thought it was good Star Wars. So that's how I felt about it, but thought that was worth mentioning because I'm like, I literally did not notice that until I watched other people talk about it, and they were upset about that, and I was like, oh man, I didn't even realize that. Somehow I caught the thing about the kids leaving where it was like the similar stories. Didn't register that it was constantly girls though. But I just thought that was funny, where I was like, how did I miss that? But I caught the part where I was like, huh, this story is just like this story, but I didn't register anything about like, you know, the characters all being like young girls. So I thought that was funny. Like I caught half of it, but it was like, oh, the actual characters was just, didn't even pay attention. It's just the story is what I noticed. But that's how I felt about it. Thought it was all good. Didn't bother me. We'd love to know if it bothered you in general, just what you guys thought about this volume, of course. Favorite episodes, least favorite episodes, which ones for sure, if you had to, you know, title them out, which ones do you think should actually get full series? Like for me, of course, was the longest one being 20 minutes. The Journey to Darkhead, obviously the one that I would be like, all right, that I want to see a full series on. It would be interesting for Screecher's Reach, but I think it would take such a long time for that series to like build up to something where it's like, man, like this is what it wouldn't be like the first season or anything. It would be like, you know, if she left and found another Jedi, it would just, I don't know. I feel like I would want her to be within the dark side for like a full season or something, but I feel like it would just kind of take too long for it to get to be like a really crazy point. So for that one, not too much, but Darkhead, the dancing episode, the spy dancer, for sure would love to see that continue. I think those are the only two. The Journey to Darkhead and the spy dancer are definitely the ones where I'm like, I would like to see that continue. I think Sith is cool, but that's one that's like, that could literally be anything. There is nothing in particular about that aside from the fact that it's a character that used to be a Sith that wants to be more light side or possibly gray Jedi. You know, like I can't say I'm like overly hyped about it. It was just like that story was definitely great, and I'm sure it would be a cool story. But also, it is what it is. I mean, Ahsoka wasn't a former Sith or anything, but her constant thing is like, I'm no Jedi. Like, she'll do other stuff that needs to be done, you know? So it's kind of like, I feel like it would be the same. If someone's going to like the center, it's like, it doesn't matter if you're coming from the light or dark. The whole point is like, you're kind of just going to the center. So it just is what it is. I think visually, if I could see anything like that again, that would be great. It wouldn't have to be that specific character where the former Sith, because I don't think she gets a name in that first episode, but it wouldn't have to be her. I think just any show, Star Wars based, where it involves like those splashes of colors and that painting style specifically like that would be great. I think visually, pretty much any of these work going forward again, but story wise, definitely episode 5, The Journey to Darkhead, and episode 6, The Spy Dancer, are the 2 episodes where I'm like, I would love to see those specifically continue going forward. If we could get more dark stuff like the Pit, where it's just the dark stuff, I've always said, I was like, man, every time I see more Stormtrooper stuff, like when I was watching Andor, I was like, man, they really need to just make an effing show that's just about Stormtroopers, and not Stormtroopers like Finn, where it's like they're kind of questioning what to do. It's like, no, these are just Stormtroopers in the Empire doing dark stuff. Like, I actually want a show that's just set within the Empire of Stormtroopers doing dark things. I'm like, they really need to make a show like that, and I don't know why they haven't yet. Like, I don't need to see their names or see their faces and stuff. They can have whatever names they want. They can take off their helmets. Sure, you got actors and whatever. But I'm like, they need to make a Stormtrooper show. It could even be CG. That way, you don't even have to have them take their helmets off ever. We never see them with helmets off. That would be really interesting. But they need to make a dark, like legit, just a dark Star Wars show, which Andor is definitely getting close. We'll see what happens, especially with season 2 and obviously where it's leading. We'll see how dark things get there. But I'm like, that so far, Andor, I think, is the closest we've actually gotten to what I'm hoping for at some point. It's just like a full-on Stormtrooper series where it's just like, it's kind of dark to watch. I like dark stuff, so that's why I want it. I don't know how upbeat people would really feel about it, but I'm like, we need it. We need just like dark Star Wars. But I'd like to see it personally. We'll see what happens with that going forward. But enjoyed this season a ton. Like I said, my 2 episodes, episode 5 and 6, those are the ones that I would like to see continue. But ultimately, I enjoyed pretty much every single episode. I was pleasantly surprised. I was like, I think there were like 2 or 3 episodes. Like the singing episode, admitted, I think it was like episode 2 for the first volume. I was like, I think a lot of people are like that. And then there was like the Astro Boy one. It was okay, but I think that may have been like my least favorite one, out of the whole volume. But all in all, I definitely enjoyed volume 2 more than volume 1. So just looking back at volume 1, there were only 2 episodes. And I think episode 9 I was kind of okay with. I think episode 9 I remember being kind of just like, it was all right. Something about it, I just remember thinking like I didn't like it as much as I thought I would. And I feel like I said that when I reviewed that a while back. It was like something about it was like, I felt like I should enjoy episode 9 from the last volume way more than I actually did. And for some reason I just did. There was a cool thing in there. I can't remember what it was, but there was something that was super cool, I remember. But I just didn't enjoy it as much as I thought I would. But definitely episode 6 from volume 1, which is TLB1. That was the Astro Boy episode. I was like, oh, okay. And then episode 2, Tatooine Rhapsody. Also just okay. Which also gets a reference in this volume as well. So the group from that actually does get a reference in the I'm just gonna call it the Wallace and Gromit episode, the I Am Your Mother in episode 4. I think that's their poster as well in her bedroom. So that's it for Visions Volume 2. I absolutely loved it. Thought it was better than the last. We'll love to know your thoughts. So favorite episodes, least favorite episodes. If there's anything random you guys would like to see, if you want to see them do, because I think, Boba Fett was in episode 2 of that Tatooine Rhapsody episode. What other characters would you guys like to see, even non-canon or anything? What other characters would you guys like to see? Because I think there was one other thing in volume 1. Was it Qui-Gon Jinn? I think that was the only one that was like close to being canon, because I think it was Qui-Gon Jinn, if I'm not mistaken. But other than that, it was just like, okay. Like what other characters can we get? Even if it's non-canon, I would love to see a ton of characters in a ton of different styles. Like anime Vader would be wild, I'm sure. So I'd love to see Vader come in and do some crazy stuff. But we'll let us know what characters you guys would like to see. Like I said, what you guys thought about volume 2 as a whole, your favorite episodes, least favorite episodes. So please put your comments down in the comment section below. And of course, thanks for watching.